everybody, and welcome to What's Your Scene? I'm Jonathan Oldham.
I'm Mark Calderaro.
And today we are talking about Comic-Con.
Comic-Con, and specifically, like, the Comic-Con, not just comic conventions. This is the San Diego Comic-Con. It's the con to end all.
The big one, the one that takes over San Diego every year and blitzes us with cosplay, new comic books, and of course now the big movies and the big TV shows.
Yeah. And we got someone awesome with us today.
Yeah, we have David Server here.
Hey everybody.
He's been going to Comic-Con for 15 years.
For about 15 years, yes.
That's awesome. I mean, that's like, you're a professional.
Yeah, that's over half my life, quite frankly. And I'm kind of old, too.
Yeah.
So how are you doing today, man?
I'm great. I'm really looking forward to this. How are you guys?
We're good, yeah. It's a nice Sunday afternoon.
It's better to be inside right now. LA people are very well known. I just moved here recently, but I know that we're all babies when it comes to weather, and it's hot today. So being inside, I feel like we're winning. I feel like we're doing it right.
Yeah. More air conditioning would be better, but
nah, fans are fine.
I'm happy about this fan. You can't see it because this is audio, but there's a fan above us, and I'm happy for it.
I'm glad that you understand the format. This is
I'm
good.
all over it.
Explain what you see.
This is my first podcast rodeo.
Oh yeah, by the way, it's a sunny, warm afternoon in LA.
Okay, good job, Jono, but you already got... this guy scooped you on describing what's going on around us.
I thought I'd make a little bit of effort.
Yeah, so Jono, what's your experience with Comic-Con?
It's basically Entourage. When Entourage went to Comic-Con and they had, they were trying to talk up Vin's new film, and there was... one of the...
I've never seen Entourage, so you're looking at me for recognition.
One of the reviewers was going to pan the film Aquaman, and so the gang got a whole bunch of porn stars to basically pleasure the reviewer into giving a good review. That's basically what I knew. And
You've now just made me glad that I haven't seen Entourage.
Yeah, you don't watch Entourage. I mean, now I rewatched it, and it's horrible. It's a horrible
But
show.
okay, all right. I mean, I haven't seen it, so I can't either defend nor attack it.
The people on it shouldn't be on it. Like, they shouldn't be on TV.
I like Jeremy Piven.
This could be a whole other podcast episode. I'm just saying.
Are you getting impatient?
I'm not impatient. I'm saying I'm looking for topics for you guys. I'm getting into the spirit of different themes every week. I would not be the guest for that show, though I have seen Entourage.
Yeah.
So I've never been to Comic-Con, and it's been one of those things where, like, oh, that'd be cool, and then oh wait, it's getting too big. Oh, I'm getting reports of, oh no, it's crazy now. It's all about the presentations,
the big stars,
the big studios,
sure.
and the little guys that are coming out with the new amazing ideas. It's kind of like, I want to, but it seems like a lot of effort.
Okay, yeah, no, I understand it. It does, and it can be intimidating, which again is one of the reasons why we do this thing, because this is like a big, established subculture that if you want to get involved in it, there's so much history to it, and there's so much that's evolving now that it can be kind of weird to do.
Yeah, and it's kind of like Burning Man now. It feels like it's got the same thing. It's like you need a costume, you need to know how it works, you need to know the processes.
And it's another thing that it used to be in the kind of the fringes, and now all of a sudden, you're hearing about it all the time. Yeah, even if it's not something you're involved in, you're aware of it.
It used to be a subculture, and now it's a culture of its own.
Oh my goodness. Yeah, my only experience with this is my fun Comic-Con experience. I went one year. I think it was 2005. I don't remember. It was right before Serenity was coming out, and so it was like a big thing that the Serenity cast was there. And me and my friend just went down for the day. We woke up and we're like, oh, I guess let's go to Comic-Con. That shows you how long ago it's been, because you can't really do that now anymore. But we just went, and we ran into one of my childhood idols there, Lloyd Kaufman. And he's a big, if you guys like Trauma film, he made The Toxic Avenger and is responsible for, in a more contemporary reason, he is the reason that James Gunn has a career now. So if you like Guardians of the Galaxy, you can kind of thank Lloyd Kaufman for that. Wow. But Lloyd Kaufman, he was talking to me and my friend, we were kind of gushing, and then he just assumed that we were gay, and then started to introduce us to other people as the two gay boys from upstate New York, and it's like, what am I going to do, correct Lloyd Kaufman? Yeah, I just completely went with it, and we were just having a great time. So if Lloyd Kaufman, if you're listening to this and you remember me, yes, I was that one of the two gay boys from upstate New York, but I am not gay. And that's okay. I don't mind.
Not that there's anything
I just
wrong.
want to fact check you. You know what I mean?
Yeah, fair enough.
So that's basically my only Comic-Con experience.
Okay.
But our guest knows a hell of a lot more about this than we do.
I want to
And
hear more from David about...
Honestly...
Because we're absolutely ignorant, basically.
I want to hear more about David's thoughts on my sexuality. So maybe he can not only help with Comic-Con, but also, like, follow up Lloyd Kaufman.
That's interesting. Maybe that can be a different conversation.
I only prepared for the Comic-Con part of the podcast, but listen, man, like I'm here to talk through anything that you want to talk about.
We're a gotcha question style podcast. I didn't know if you knew that.
Well, you sound like you have everything that you need figured out in your life figured out, and I say whatever you decide, I support and good for you.
I
Does
appreciate
Comic-Con
that.
make you gay?
Okay, that is not the views of this podcast. All right. So you've been going for 15 years now, you said, right?
Yes. Yeah.
So kind of what's your experience with it? How did you get involved with it? How did this go about?
So I have had this sort of wonderful, constantly evolving experience with Comic-Con because, I obviously live in Los Angeles now, but I grew up in Boston. And when I was in Boston, I love Boston. It's a beautiful city. I was sort of trying to figure out, like, where am I going with my life? What am I going to do? But I've always been a geek. Been a geek since I was a little kid. Grew up obsessed with Star Wars and X-Men comics. And
Did you hang around Newberry Comics?
I was a New England comics guy.
Oh, okay. All right, that's okay.
Yeah,
oh,
yeah.
Wow.
I would do my little circuit in Harvard Square.
Sure.
So I would New England Comics was my store. I'd sort of stop into Million Year Picnic. I would say Newberry was sort of because they had so much more music than comics.
Yeah.
But they were like, oh, if I went to two places and they didn't have my issue, who knows? Maybe Newberry would have it.
Sure.
Or I just didn't want to go back after my lunch break. But so basically, that was always my experience growing up, and I had this sort of unexpected thing happen when I was in high school, where I ended up sort of accidentally working for a movie news website.
Could be a worse thing to accidentally fall into.
It was a wonderful accident. They didn't. I offered to send them emails just in terms of getting some of their back content up to date in terms of stories and news, and they were like, "Oh, you want a job?" And I was like, "It's not what I said, but yeah, that sounds great." So I worked for them for a while, and they realized how old I was, and they were like, "That's weird. We don't really care. Feel free to keep working."
Yeah. Just don't mention your age ever again.
Exactly.
Yeah.
This is almost famous stuff.
It was very cool and fun.
Minus
and
the sex, drugs, and the rock and roll.
That's true.
That's basically
if
his
you
life.
replace all those things with comic books and movies, then yes. But so basically, what happened was, by the time I'd been doing that for them for a while,
I've replaced all those things.
it's not that bad.
No, it's actually.
So by the time that my first Comic-Con rolled around, the website had actually been bought by DreamWorks. DreamWorks, studios, the film company, bought the website. And all of a sudden, they had all this money for funding, and they were using the website.
Is that not a conflict of interest? But
that was a weird thing that they never quite figured out. The website is unfortunately defunct now, not because of that, but just for other reasons. But it was always sort of can we feed them stories? I never really reported on the DreamWorks movies. My domain was all the comic book stuff.
Comic book stuff?
Superheroes,
Okay.
all that sort of, the first wave of comic book movies. And as it happened, one of the things they, did is that since they had their association with DreamWorks, they helped run the Time Machine promotional booth at Comic-Con.
The H.G. Wells movie.
Yeah, the movie with Guy Pearce.
Yeah. One of your countrymen, Jono.
Yeah. He's doing well.
Is he doing well? How is he? Do you hang out with? When was the last time you had tea with him?
Never had tea with him. I remember he used to come to my gym in Melbourne.
Oh, okay.
That's about the interaction.
That story went a lot less interestingly than I thought.
It's sad, isn't it? He's very thin and wiry. And very focused on what he was doing, very distracted. That's about.
That's a good story. All right, let's get back to this thing.
And this is actually a good reference point. So, for example, at that point in time, when DreamWorks was bringing the Time Machine to Comic-Con,
right.
I don't believe the cast was there. It's possible they did a panel, but the main emphasis was the props. They had a big booth, and they brought out they had the actual machine.
Right.
Which, as a side note, I know that's not people's favorite movie in the world. The craftsmanship on that machine was quite amazing. It was beautiful carved wood. It was really cool to see that up close. But so basically, they used a lot of the writers for the website as sort of volunteers helping to run the booth.
Okay,
so we would give tours. We would say these are the Eloy spear tips. This is the machine from the film.
So this this is, if you've never ever been to a convention before, the idea of like a booth setup is like you go into this, you just walk into this giant convention center, there's a huge hall, and all of these different stalls are there with all different things. And it could be whatever the convention is. You could go to a gum convention and like Wrigley's is going to have their friggin' booth. But like at Comic-Con, right, so DreamWorks had their own booth, or was it a Time Machine booth, or...
It was a Time Machine specific booth, and basically, I'd always loved comics. I'd always thought Comic-Con looked cool. I'd never been before, and this was sort of my first opportunity where I was able to actually go. And, it was perfect because the way that it was set up, there were rotating shifts of who was running the booth, so it meant that you would sort of take some time to run the booth, and then you could just walk around.
Because you was a fan, so you were there for work technically, but you were also there as a fan.
Exactly. I mean, it was really, that was one of the ones where I'd wanted to go as a fan for a long time prior to that, and that was this wonderful sort of icebreaker excuse to actually do it, and do it with like, frankly, a little bit of extra. I got to, walk onto the convention hall early because they were setting up. A little bit of a like slight
Inside
VIP,
line,
which for me in high school,
which every fanboy, so you were still in high school at this point.
Yeah.
So you got to fly over 3,000 miles to go to one of the most prestigious like comic thing events of the year and theoretically get paid for it?
I was so happy. And basically it was wonderful because I had never experienced any of this before. So when I walked onto the convention hall for the first time, and it's like for people that don't know, for Comic-Con in San Diego, it is the San Diego Convention Center. It is
gorgeous,
beautiful convention center, and huge, like massive, and very distinct looking. Even like the architecture, people now draw it into like comic books. It's on like The Simpsons. It's got these like big rings around. It looks like something from space.
Yeah, absolutely. If I were filming a quasi-futuristic like mall, I would want it to be in the San Diego Convention.
Well, and it's great because it's one of those things that a lot of the time, I think Entourage, this happened as well, but whenever someone shows, like, air quotes, Comic-Con in a TV show, it's always, like, some hotel. And guys, like, Comic-Con is so much cooler than this. Like, I get it, like, no one's gonna know, but as a fan, you go, like, that's not the awesome building that looks like it's from space.
Yeah.
So, basically, there's the actual, convention hall, and then there is the Gaslamp District of San Diego, which is, right outside when you leave the convention hall. It's a bunch of restaurants, little shops, like little lights, and it's where everyone goes after the hall closes, and you get dinner and drinks, depending on, your age.
Which is also kind of cool, pardon me, I'm going to but like the Gaslamp District, if you're not familiar with San Diego, the way I would describe the Gaslamp District is it's the district with clubs that have very strict dress code policies, and it's dress shirt, nice jeans, and sandals, right? Because that's kind of how San Diego is. It's kind of like that bro-y-ish. It's like beach bro almost. And so like the Gaslamp District is the most beach bro area. But when Comic-Con rolls around, it's like a whole different clientele kind of takes over the Gaslamp District, which is a very interesting kind of cultural shift, which is fun.
And every single store and every single restaurant, they all have their Comic-Con specials, like places that would be like, like a shoe store. There's like Spider-Man in the window. Like,
right.
Nobody does not take advantage of that. And it's great, because it's just like that whole area is just absorbed by complete comic bookery, and it's fantastic.
Yeah.
So my first time going, it was really, like, I mean, literally, I walk in and you're looking at the building and it's so big and I've never seen before. It's so, like, the whole thing's so impressive. And you walk onto the floor and I mean, like, my little fanboy eyes just became, like, saucers. Like, because you can't see all the way from one end of the floor to the other. You look down and there's just, like, waves and waves of, like, booths and different stalls, and, like, some of them are retailers and some of them are promotional for film, television, and it's like more than you can process immediately, but it was fantastic. It was phenomenal. And in that this was around 2001, it was a slightly different sort of look than it is now, and we'll sort of get to that evolution. But, I mean, the bones of it have always been the same, where you sort of walk on, and basically, as you mentioned, it's this very large convention hall. It certainly feels like a football field, if not like more.
Yeah.
And, generally speaking, the big sort of showiest booths are all clustered in the middle. So the big publishers, Marvel Comics, DC, Image, Dark Horse, they've got all of their stuff sort of in the middle of the floor because their setup is the biggest. They've got like statues.
Yeah, they've got the biggest budget for like promotionally cool looking stuff, and you want the cool stuff in the middle of the hall so that people have to go through everything to like see that high budget stuff. Yeah, absolutely.
So you walk in and like the middle is like giant Marvel logo, giant DC logo, Batman costume, sort of like stuff from like Thor. It's all that stuff, and that's sort of the center of the floor. And then basically, so that if you walk in, that's sort of the thing in the middle. As you go down the sort of the aisles, there's a general, it's not completely locked into place, but there's general sections that focus on different things. So for example, there's one long stretch of it that are all retailers, and it's all, basically, and sometimes there'll be a section that is comic book retailers. So it's lots of long boxes, which is how people store comics. So that if you're looking for like, an old specific issue of Spider-Man, you flip through, it's like not Spider-Man 13, 14, 15, 16, got it.
Which, of course, in 2001, the word long box might not actually be in regular parlance, but, I think everybody kind of listening knows what a long box is at this point.
That's the thing. A lot of the stuff, it's become so much the zeitgeist that, certainly in entertainment, that's a more common term now because comics are around more.
Yeah.
So that'll be one section. Then there'll be a section that's all like toys. So it's all the different like toy sellers. There'll be another section next to that, which has grown a lot over time, which is like video game stuff. But basically, all of the sort of different comic adjacent subcultures have a little sort of stretch of the floor. But I will say that first year that I went was the year that I would say it was the most predominantly comic book centric.
Sure.
I remember the Time Machine booth was interesting because it was one of the earlier film experiments of like, is this a good promotional place for movies and stuff like that.
Yeah. They were putting out the feelers, and they would bring the props there, but they weren't bringing the cast there yet.
Right. It was much more of an exploratory thing of like, and like to their credit, like they went all out on the props. And they had, it was a great setup. I mean, they had.
I want to see that prop now, honestly.
It's really beautiful. I think it was a Stan Winston prop.
Oh, well, okay. No wonder it looked gorgeous.
Yeah, and it was just, it really was an impressive thing, and it was like in the middle of the booth, and in the movie, it's sort of like this finely carved like woodworking and like all the pieces of glass and metal. So that was my first year, and it was phenomenal. It was fantastic. I would say in terms of my personal experience, obviously there was a lot of running the tours, which was really fun. Everybody was really excited. They thought it was cool. They were happy to hear about the movie. And then just sort of walking the convention floor. So I got to sort of see all the different sections. I got to sort of see how everything worked. The other big part of Comic-Con, which I got into more later, but that probably merits referencing, there's the convention floor. And that's where it's sort of like the big mall / promotional area.
Right.
So it's where all of the, if there's exhibits about like props from films, stuff like that. There's that, commerce, all the little booths that are selling either comic books or toys or what have you. That's the actual convention exhibit hall.
Oh, okay.
Above the convention hall on the second floor are all of the rooms where they have panels.
Right.
Which are the other big component of any Comic-Con, but San Diego.
And especially if your only experience with Comic-Con is tertiary media stuff, a lot of what you'll see trickle out is the stuff that goes on in these panels.
Absolutely. Yeah. No, because the floor, it's like a big mall and a big photo op where it's like all the stuff, like everyone's walking around, all the different like things that are on display. The thing that's great about the panels is that that's where there's actual professionals talking about their work, talking about, there's a million different subjects covered, and, when you first walk into Comic-Con, you get this little, like, sort of program. It's actually not little at all, it's like a phone book.
Yeah.
And it comes with a map of the convention floor, and it tells you what all of the sort of, different retailers are and where they're located, but there's also a section in the back which is what are all the panels going on every different day, who is speaking on them, what have they worked on.
And so, like, give me a little flavor of, like, what's an example of a panel? Or what's an example of, like, a good panel that you would see?
So, a classic example would be, one of the big publishers gets all of their writers together to talk about what they're planning for the coming year. So, for example, Marvel will have a big, what's coming up for the Marvel Universe this year? And they'll get all the writers from, like, Captain America and the X-Men and Spider-Man, and, they're talking about books that won't be published for like a year or so.
Very exciting.
But they're teasing out what storylines they're going to do. They're answering fan questions about sort of is this character coming back from the dead? What's going on with this arc? Are you going to bring back this artist? all of that stuff. And that's one of the big ones because, comic fans are sort of like, looking to sort of what's going on in the storylines that I'm reading, month to month.
Yeah, which is, again, this is kind of funny because all this is very prescient of where mainstream culture has gone in the last 15 years. Because if you think of, like, my God, my Twitter feed is inundated with, like, pictures from the Ghostbusters set or, like, any sort of tidbit of little info about a new thing.
Whereas, like a prop or something.
Yeah, but like that just simply didn't happen to, like, there were very few people were aware of, like, or wanted to see still photos of Jurassic Park while Steven Spielberg was making it. Like, it just wasn't the same. And maybe that's due to the turnaround, but kind of mainstream media has almost gone more fanboy-like in the sense that these things that Comic-Con has been doing for years, these panels that, like, satiate that appetite for this culture you're in, has now completely infiltrated how we view all sort of media, whether that be movie-like,
and I think
etc.
the advent of the director's commentary on DVDs just sort of shifted that thinking of, like,
I can see that.
Well, now we get this inside line of how the movie was made. I take that a bit further, and you put a panel on, and you basically ask those questions directly to the director.
Right. Okay.
It's like, it's like, oh, when this happened, what did that mean, and how did it work out, and what were the logistics of you deciding that the story should go this way?
Right.
And then there's little stories that go along with that, and I listened to Usual Suspects, inside. Director's commentary, and it was like so cool. All this information.
Right. And so that's kind of what you're getting at these panels. Now, how long is Comic-Con? How many days of panels are there? How many?
Well, Comic-Con, basically, formally, Comic-Con runs from Thursday until Sunday. So, like, it officially opens on Thursday morning. It's all Thursday, all Friday, all Saturday, and most of Sunday. It usually closes like a little bit earlier.
So it's an extended
long
weekend.
Yeah. That being said, Wednesday evening is preview night. And preview night, if you order a pass for the entire show, you get access to the convention floor for like 3 or 4 hours on Wednesday. There's no panels going on, but if you just want to, like, walk around, buy stuff, see where everything is,
meet up with all your friends who you're meeting there in town.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
Then you have access to sort of, like, check out the floor early, and then Thursday morning, everything is up and running, the panels, etc.
It's a soft open.
Exactly.
Look at this. Look how business savvy I am.
It's very.
I know. Don't you want to open a business with me? I know.
And so when you arrived at Comic-Con and you're doing the Time Machine booth, did you feel like you'd arrived home?
Oh yeah. It wasn't even home, because honestly it was like more than that. It was literally as though, because it wasn't like,
you've gone to your own universe.
Yeah, like if I went into a comic book store, I felt like I'm home. When I went to Comic-Con, it was like I'd gone to, like, Valhalla. It was sort of like you couldn't believe, because and I think it's funny because, and this sort of extends beyond Comic-Con to actual comic book stores. Comic book stores when I was growing up were a little bit more cave-like. They were a little bit more dark and underground.
As someone who's worked for Magic the Gathering for the last 10 years, I understand exactly what you mean of being in this store. It's just cave-like.
Presentation's not important. The story and the characters, they're important.
And it's funny because I had a fondness for the cave thing. But at the same time, when it became a little bit more mainstream and it started being a little bit more welcoming and a little bit, like, better lit and a little bit less
musty.
I was kind of into that too. So it was interesting though, because for me, I would go into my little comic book store cave, in Boston, and I'd be like, I'm home. And you walk into this massive building where anywhere you look is a thing you want to go see. And you literally are like, I don't know what to do.
Yeah.
Like,
there's too much.
There's too many things for me to look at. And I still have that feeling now. In a way, it's because every year they proportionately grow it somehow.
Yeah.
But I think that, to me, just that sense of, like, you truly are just, like, bathing in the culture.
Well, and it's kind of funny that this is... I was waiting for this analogy to break down before I said it, but it hasn't so far. I think the fact that it's in San Diego, you get to bask in this. You're, like, out of the cave.
Oh, yeah.
It's
the fresh air.
Yeah, and you're surrounded by this gorgeousness all over. And the convention hall mirrors that feeling, even though you're kind of inside, like, the brightness, the showiness, the glossiness of it. It feels...
The nerds start to get some vitamin D, a bit of sun.
Wow. We both qualify with it well.
I think it's one of those things where I I like the whole sense of like this is our community, but I am someone that is very pro join us. Like, come on, this is fun. There's gonna be one of my favorite things to do is when someone really loves like one comic or one TV show and they're like, I wanna like get to know other stuff. Trying to figure out like, oh, what comics would you love based on this comic? Oh, what TV shows, what movies would you love? And then I think the environment has so picked up that attitude where it's like the
welcoming.
The community is very much about like, and it's funny because I know I'm very friendly with a lot of the guys at Golden Apple Comics. And I know for a fact that it's a very high priority for them that when a customer comes in, one of the things they do is they ask what they're picking up, what they're reading, and then they sort of go, oh, if you like this book, here's these other books you might enjoy. They have similar tones or the writing style.
Yeah.
So I think to me, Comic-Con is a good example of the fact that, that sort of, as you're saying, of the convention hall and the tone, it has that sort of like, welcome to this, it's big and it's inviting and it's bright and there's a place for you, come find what your place is.
Yeah, and that even segues well into something we talked a little before we went on air is your role at these conventions has changed, right? That first year you were in high school, you were just repping the time machine and there as a super fanboy when you weren't stuck at the booth, right? But now for the last, 14 years or whatever, you have gone through various incarnations of your association with Comic-Con as it's changed and
absolutely.
got
No,
larger.
this is part of why Comic-Con is sort of a special thing for me because, at this point now I've been fortunate enough to do a lot of these geeky events and things. But I feel like Comic-Con has been a place where I truly have been able to have these very specific, distinct experiences every year. Obviously, that first year was sort of simultaneously my first sort of mini professional experience, but also just like the pure, fanboy. Just like, oh my god, all the things. I'm going to buy this toy, I'm going to wear this shirt.
Which is basically no longer a dirty word. And fanboy was a dirty word for a long time, and it's just basically not anymore.
Yeah, I think it's taken on a much more positive, all this stuff. I mean, like, I think there were times when it was sort of like, ugh, and it was like, which is a bummer. Now it's much more of this sort of like inclusive, fun, upbeat thing, which makes me happy. Because certainly I am still a fanboy. So subsequent to that, it wasn't the next year, but it was like a couple years later. So I had come up with my own comic book sort of idea in Boston in high school, but it was sort of only partially formed. I ended up meeting my co-writer, who actually was a prior guest of yours, Jackson Lansing.
Ah, yes.
Yeah.
Wait, you can't say prior because we haven't figured out a release schedule yet. So
future guest.
There we go.
Yeah, potentially. I don't know.
We'll call him the once and future guest.
The once and future guest, Jackson Lansing.
Okay.
We met at USC Film School, and we started writing together. And we ended up collaborating on this pitch that I'd sort of started working on, and we were able to basically get a packet together. We found an artist, we went through the whole process, and that should be something that if you guys haven't covered, or you should definitely cover at some point, because that's a great other thing, just putting a comic book pitch together.
Oh, okay.
There's a lot to cover.
Pitching in general gets kind of weird, as I'm sure you know.
Well, so that's the thing. So we got our pitch materials together, and then we actually pitched the book at Comic-Con. So we had...
Is that something that happens frequently?
It's a funny thing. You will hear two schools of thought on this, and there's no right or wrong. There are certain people that will say it is a great idea to pitch a book at San Diego Comic-Con, and there are certain people that will say it is a terrible idea to pitch a book at San Diego Comic-Con.
Is it a baptism in fire? Yeah.
The tricky thing I would say from that experience, and like that year was sort of it was exciting because it was like a goal-driven year. I mean, when you're running a booth or where you're a fan, it's passive. You're just sort of there.
Yeah.
That was the year where it was like, all right, we need to talk to these editors from these companies. We need to sort of like try and look professional.
So what you're saying is that it was less fun?
It was fun in a more sort of in a more engaging, active way. It was more stressful.
Yeah,
I will say that.
Yeah, I think that's a better way to put it.
It was because it was exciting, but it was definitely stressful. So we had our packet for our book, which is called Freak Show. And we knew the editors and the publishers that would potentially make sense. And we were like, all right, well, it's sort of a dark superhero comic. So, Image might publish this. All the different comic publishers have different tones or voices.
Yeah, sure.
So we're like, Image Comics could be a home for this. Dark Horse Comics could be a home for this. We figured out where everybody was, what all their booths were. The trick is Comic-Con is so overwhelming and so crowded and so just sort of like, there's so much going on.
What year was this?
This was, God, what year would this have been? This would have been maybe 6 or 7 years ago.
Right.
Yeah.
And at that stage, it had got that
It was
popular.
still inundating and overwhelming.
It was fairly overwhelming immediately. I would say every year it has ratcheted up a little in terms of how much stimulus and how much stuff and what's there.
Cool.
Basically, we sort of knew who all of our targets were. The trick is that, everyone's so busy that they can't really focus all that well. Like, they're running a booth, they're making sure their panels are on schedule. There are certain moments where they are specifically set up to receive pitches. And, I think they've made that more of a sort of organized thing over the last couple of years where it's like, these are the hours in which you can line up to present a pitch to this person and see if it's going to work. At that time, we really did just hop around with our packet and see who would talk to us.
Yeah.
On the plus side, great access. Like, people are there, you can talk to them, and that was wonderful. And they were all great. We talked to, the heads of these huge companies, and it was like a real conversation. It wasn't like a long conversation, but they were there. They were respectful, they were listening, and we got it into the hands of everybody that we wanted to get it to.
Great.
I think that the trick for me from that experience, what we had, it's great to meet people, like, face to face, shake their hand, business card, etc. If you can get materials in their hands, then great. But sometimes it's literally just about, like, so it's not a blind submission. You have the opportunity to be like, hey, we've met, we've spoken. It doesn't mean that it's going to be the first thing that they read when they get back from Comic-Con, because they're going to be swamped with post-Comic-Con stuff.
But who knows? They might be on the toilet 2 weeks later and read your thing.
Stranger things have happened. Yeah,
it's true.
Yeah. So you were there. So you pitched that, and that was a successful pitch, I thought, right?
It was. So what ended up happening? It was actually kind of a funny story. We pitched it to all these different publishers that we were interested in pitching it to, and they were all wonderful. Our artist had a relationship with a smaller publishing company called Ape Entertainment, and one of the heads of that company actually did some work for us on our pitch packet, and he never said anything about being interested in the book, so we kind of presumed he was being polite, and like wasn't passing, overtly because we didn't ask, but if he was curious, he would have said something.
Yeah.
About a month after the show, and we've been doing follow-up with all of the different editors that we'd spoken with, and slowly but surely we were getting, either passes or sort of, we had a couple of long-form conversations, which was great because, all companies that we loved. But, we were starting to sort of figure out, well, where were we going to land? That publisher, whose booth we ended up spending a lot of time with just because we were, grateful for their help and, really that we'd, they actually asked our artists, like, is there a reason why they didn't pitch us the book?
Wow.
And we literally were sort of like, oh, we just assumed since you'd seen all the materials and didn't say anything, you didn't want it. And they were like, oh no, we would love to publish this.
There you go.
So they actually ended up publishing our book.
Cool.
So, it was great because we managed to meet all these editors and we had that experience, which was really fascinating. It was really fun, and it was stressful, but it was like the kind of stressful that I feel like I got a lot of good experience out of. And we also, thankfully, were able to get published.
Yeah, it's a massive success story.
Yeah, it's huge.
It's basically the dream of 50% of the people that go to Comic-Con is that they have an idea.
But I think
they want to get it. And people create booths.
Yeah, and results may vary.
I'm sure.
Right,
we were very lucky. I think that, what I will say is that insofar as we were able to talk to all those people, that wasn't luck. That was, I think, a credit to the show. And the fact that being at that show, even if it's crowded, we did meet those people. They are there. You can talk to them even briefly.
And was your packet really well set up? Was it solid, or was it like, oh, okay, I guess this is what we're gonna?
We were young for what we were trying to do. I think we were younger than a lot of writers pitching their first book, so we were very thorough. And thankfully, our artist was both very good and he generated a lot of content for us.
Do you think that helped? Do you think that made a difference in the way people perceived you?
I think I'm so proud of the book. I love the book. I think having great art is a great aid. I think that if you can put something down in front of somebody and it looks great, it helps them be more engaged in reading it and considering it. Mm-hmm. So I definitely think Joe Suter was our artist, and he's gone on to do Spider-Man and the Transformers. He's done a bunch of big branded books now. He did just gorgeous work for us. and
I've seen
helped.
some of the character renderings, and they were fantastic from the start.
Yeah, he's really talented.
So went fan. Then you went to pitch writer, basically, or you're pitching. So then you went to a seller, and now you're repping stuff too, right?
Yeah,
So
yeah.
it's even gone again. So this is like a bunch of evolutions of all of these things. You've kind of done everything there is to do at Comic Con.
Absolutely. No, yeah. I mean, I think that sort of like, I think I don't know if it was a year later or 2 years later, but selling the book from the Ape Entertainment's booth, really interesting.
And this was you were selling Freak Show?
Yes.
This
was I think we had the collection. We had the trade paperback. Like little thing with comics. There's single issues, which are the things that sort of ship to comic shops every month, sort of the monthly installment. And then when a story has, the arc has reached a conclusion, it's collected as a, either graphic novel or trade paperback,
Sure.
Whatever term you prefer. But we had the collection of all 3 issues. And this is, again, stuff that I learned from a selling standpoint. You're always better off having, whether it's collected, whether it's just, the individual issues, but it's the whole story. People are much more inclined to buy
an arc.
all of it. Exactly.
Yeah.
Fair enough.
So that was the thing we learned. Getting people's attention. This is one of those things that I will say Jackson is fantastic at. He's really good at it. I learned a lot watching him.
Sure.
Because it takes me, I don't want to speak up. I don't want to get someone's attention if they're doing something else. Jack sold like a metric ton of our comic. Literally crates of the book would vanish because he was just selling them left and right.
Yeah.
And it's a skill. I mean, it really is. It's that ability to get someone's attention, keep them engaged,
Sure.
to convince them of the sale. Seeing someone go from an I'm not going to buy this to a I'm going to consider buying this to a I'm going to buy this. I mean, again, totally new experience for me. Something I've never done anywhere but Comic-Con in that sort of, because I've worked with selling people's material in my current profession, which we'll get to in a second. But that sense of you're on the floor, you're making eye contact, and you're trying to complete a person-to-person sale with a stranger and no build-up. It's a very distinct thing.
Oh yeah.
And were you just selling to distributors? Were you trying to sell it to what was this? What was this?
This was literally to fans. It was just people
one-to-one
walking down the aisles, because the way that Comic-Con works is the convention hall. It's all these booths, and there are aisles designated between all the booths, and so every booth has a number and a letter so that you can literally find your place in the grid. This is another good Comic-Con pro tip. If you are a seller, you really hope you're right next to the Marvel booth or the DC booth.
Yeah,
because
sure.
you're going to get all that
Massive
foot
stuff,
traffic. Yeah. And so I know that our Ape Entertainment, our publisher, very smartly made sure to always have booths that were right in that area.
Yeah.
So all those people that had just come from what Image Comics am I going to buy? What Dark Horse Comics am I going to buy?
Yeah.
They would swing right through, and those are the people that are already primed to buy this kind of stuff.
Right.
Yeah. Let it be known what I'm picturing right now, rightly or wrongly, is this giant bazaar, right? Kind of almost like the hovels that are outside the big mart in Idiocracy.
Oh.
Yeah, right.
Oh,
right.
yeah.
And then you're just there, and you've got this trench coat on, or maybe Jackson's there because he's better at it, and he just goes up to someone and he's like, "Hey, want to buy a comic?" Or whatever, right? Yeah.
I mean,
Do you like post-apocalyptic freaks?
Yeah.
there was no trench coat, but the second half of that, you are literally sometimes going do you want to check out a comic?
Yeah.
Sometimes it's just whatever will get people's attention.
I got the stuff you need, man.
And you know what?
Yeah.
People, they want to buy a comic.
Yeah.
The nice thing is that you're at Comic-Con, so they're the people that you want to talk to.
Yeah.
Do you want to see Nightmare After Christmas type characters in a post-apocalyptic world?
Oh, we tried all kinds of
Is
stuff.
that something you might be interested in?
Look at this guy trying to be your pitch man right now. Look at Jono trying to. So but here's another thing.
When I believe in something like Freak Show, it's easy to do.
Oh, you. Stop. Stop it.
I don't know this guy. I have no allegiance. I haven't read his book. But and I think for the last 12, 15 minutes, we've kind of been talking about this as a sales perspective, but that again is just one part of this whole thing. I mean, there are people at this point now, 15 years ago, the majority of the people who are going there were comic book fans, often people who are going to look and buy comics, right? Or get insight into what Marvel is putting out the next year, comic, these things. I went there because they were releasing the Frank Quitely Sandman hardcovers. Yeah. And I really wanted to get my hands on those, But since then, it's really kind of changed a fair amount, and now like where you could say the comic book fan and the comic book writer or seller,
Yeah.
you know, we're kind of predominantly. Is that even true anymore?
You know, it's an interesting thing because, I mean, even from day one for me, I've always known the show and seen the show as this kind of hybrid of like comic books but also media, because I was going for DreamWorks. Like in my first year, I was, you know, and like, listen.
You were the interloper.
Hopefully not, but I mean, there's a way to look at it that way. But, you know, I mean, I grew up reading comics before I was like a big movie like junkie. But my first Comic-Con experience, it was already kind of this pop culture hub. I think that has every year become more and more true. In the years that I've been going, every year I think that it's wrong to look at it from the fact of like comic books are like shrinking, because listen, you walk onto the floor, there's a lot of comic books.
Oh yeah.
Like there's a ton of comic book sellers. A lot of the biggest booths are still publishers. You know, I mean, like I'm not going to say that like, you know, Warner Brothers and like Legendary and stuff like that don't have some of the bigger booths, but like Marvel and DC's booths are equally large, and those are comic book companies, and they are there to, yes, they have film television arms, but certainly like, you know, they'll have creators come to sign, writers, artists.
And exclusives. I know the Comic-Con exclusive badge is, you know, for, you know, the thing you wanted, the Sandman.
I have no idea what you're talking about.
Well, it's exclusively only at Comic-Con. They were releasing it there first. And, you know, that's, you know, it's progressed, and, you know, it's not only comic books, it's now movies.
It covers so much ground now, and I think that I always come back to this sense that, like, for me, Comic-Con is great because it keeps adding elements of pop culture to it. And I don't think that anything there doesn't feel appropriately comic book adjacent. You know, it's like, listen, like, not everything is based on a comic, but it's genre, it's subculture, it's sci-fi fantasy. And to me, the notion that, like, you go to Comic-Con, and listen, if you're a comic book fan and none of this other stuff is interesting to you, I promise you can have a full packed schedule of Comic-Con in San Diego that is only about comics.
Well, and this is kind of interesting the way that you've responded to this, because when I introed it, I didn't mean it to come off as it like comics aren't important anymore. I meant it's so big and added so many things. But this is a very important aspect of Comic-Con that I do kind of want to talk about even a little more, is this fact that when it was smaller, when it was this kind of, you know, as I'm putting air quotes around this as I say it, like purist mentality of like, no, it's a comic book convention, you know, and it's not that anymore.
Yeah.
For sometimes for better, sometimes for worse, it's not that. And there is a way to look at that of like, whatever, it was better in the old days, you know, that classic like le wrong generation thing. But like, I don't think that that's true. And it's very funny because like you responded kind of almost defensively when I brought that up, because it's such a commonly brought up criticism.
It's the easiest thing to criticize about comic.
No, and it's one of those places where, you know, it you do hear it a lot, and it's something that always kind of bums me out, just because to me that sense of like the party's getting bigger. You know, like that's always my thing. Where it's sort of like,
is that a sad thing? People are sad about parties getting bigger?
Exactly. It's like the more people that are into this and the more pop culture it is, like I'm so happy about that. And I can't tell you, like just from my little, as the guy that like, listen, I will say, nobody when I was growing up in high school, nobody ever like teased me for liking comics. Like, you know, I've seen the stereotype of like, oh, you're a nerd, whatever. Like, not everybody loved it like I did, but it wasn't like they had a problem with me liking it. But, you know, I had my little group of friends, and we would go and be obsessed with Star Wars and, you know, go to pick up our X-Men comics. And, you know, we were a little group. I can't tell you how happy it is that, you know, it makes me that I can be walking down the street now and, you know, someone's wearing a Venom t-shirt. Like, and it's not even just like, oh, how weird, someone in a Venom t-shirt. Like 5 minutes later, I see someone in like a Deadpool jersey. Yeah, and it's like, wow, man, like this is really pop culture now. And I mean, like some of this stuff, like, you know, I'm presuming your audience is kind of geeky. Deadpool, for those of you that don't know, kind of a deeper cut, but I say this with a Ryan Reynolds movie coming out next year.
Yeah, right.
So, you know, I mean, I have always been of a mind that, like, it's great to me.
And a fan decided movie. They made a small pitch, and then it's like the fans say this has to be made.
Yeah, I didn't know that.
It's a whole funny thing with Deadpool where I guess what happened was they made a pitch reel.
And it was digital. It was all digital.
It was CG. Yeah. I think a company called Blur Studios. They do a lot of game stuff, and it leaked And after it leaked,
those leaks was very much in air quotes as well.
How it got into the world is still one of those things that no one's totally explaining, but ultimately a movie got greenlit, so no one's complaining either. But, one way or another, however it happened, that showed up in the world, and now there's a Deadpool movie.
Yeah.
So I kind of think the fact that there is this central hub of pop culture that, everybody covers, that all the news outlets cover, and that everybody knows about, and that allows, like, all of these sort of other small, weird, geeky things like sort of indie animated series and vinyl toys, like stuff that doesn't, have that built-in audience in the way that Hollywood obviously does, gets a little bit of that extra spotlight on it because it's at Comic-Con. Like, I think that's great.
And this is so much remind me of, like, I lived in Austin, Texas for a long time, and it's hard not to be intimately involved with South by Southwest in some way or another, which... Now, for those of you not familiar with South by, it kind of started as this big independent music festival where it was just like thousands of bands playing, and it could be like your guy next door in Tuscaloosa, like his band like plays at South by and the labels are there or whatever. But in the last 20 years or so, it's added a film arm, it's added a tech arm. Actually, like Twitter debuted at South by Southwest Tech, and recently it's added a fashion arm and an education arm. And like, as someone who, was my South by purist, I was like mad about, oh, he's fashion, whatever. But then I realized, like, the music and the film is still there.
Right.
Like, it's not... Now it's just like, oh, if I also liked fashion, or if I was a big fashion person who also liked music, now this convention is just better for me. It's not like I have to go to the fashion parts of it, which is kind of exactly how Comic-Con works, that, like, the comic books are all still there.
Exactly.
Which is awesome. So now it's just more awesome stuff that we all like. Like, that's kind of cool.
Well, it's funny because, like, so I have a Comic-Con routine.
Oh.
Yes. Every year, what I try and do is I try and get onto the floor at the beginning of preview night.
Okay.
And
Wednesday.
On Wednesday. Wednesday, I think it's like 6 o'clock.
Okay.
I attempt to walk the entire floor on Wednesday. It's not about, like, buying stuff. It's not about...
Get an overview.
It's just, where is everything? Mental note, where is stuff? Just sort of know the layout of it.
Yep.
And I walk fast. I'm not stopping. If you want to stop, that's cool. I'm going. And that's sort of my Wednesday. So that by Thursday, I kind of know the floor. I know where I'm following up. And the thing that I love is that, like, basically, so that's sort of its own little bubble. Thursday is the day where I'm sort of, I know where everything is, and I'm, like, walking around to actually absorb stuff. If there's panels I want to go to, I'll go to those. I personally like the floor. I like bumping into people. I like bumping into friends that I don't see that often, because that's another aspect of Comic-Con we haven't really touched on. People from all over the country you don't get to see that often. You get to see all of them. Like, so many people travel for this show that friends that I have from the East Coast that I don't necessarily get to see all that often, they come out for it. For a long time, actually. So the second Comic-Con I went to after the one for Time Machine, one of my best friends growing up, Max Isaacson, who's a film director, we were the comic fans in high school. And we would always go, lunch break, we would go to New England Comics and pick up our books. So that after that first Comic-Con year, I came back to Boston with the saucer eyes.
Sure.
And I was like, oh my God, Max, Comic-Con. Yeah. It's amazing. It's huge. You gotta come. It's so great. So we went to one in Boston, which was really fun, but like not the big production. And he really got into it. So the next year, he was living in New York. He went to NYU for film school. He flew to LA, and then we drove to San Diego to go to Comic-Con together. And with the exception of one year when he had a wedding, we have been going to the show together every year, every Comic-Con since then.
That's awesome.
Which is like, I mean, that to me is such a core comic. He actually moved to Los Angeles like 2 years ago, so now it's less of a schlep. But like that to me, again, it's like a perfect example of, it's like, that's one of those Comic-Con things.
Yeah, and I'm guessing, and
it's like a pilgrimage to Mecca.
Yeah,
in a sense, yeah.
Well, and does it also go the other way? I'm sure that you've met people at Comic-Con, become friends with them, and maybe you never even see them outside of Comic-Con, but like
absolutely,
every year you're eating dinner with those people, you're getting some drinks with those people, you're gonna see them on the floor and be like, how the hell has your life been for the last year?
Yeah, no, completely. And like that's one of those
and
great
having
things.
Those conversations with, this is cool, I hated that, I love this.
Well, and that sort of is a nice combination of the two things we were just talking about. I know I can go follow up on the like sixth thing. It's like, all right, what am I looking for? I love some weird background Star Wars aliens. I love X-Men comics. I'm excited for this movie. I want to see this weird vinyl toy. I have my checklist of stuff. So I'll go have my Thursday, for example, and I'll go down the list and I'll see this thing and I'll go to this booth. I'll try this experience. Sort of fun side note. One of the new sort of trendy things at Comic-Con is for booths to have Oculus Rift experiences.
Yeah.
Right. That's like the new cool thing that you can do.
Okay, you get to do it. You got 30 seconds. What's Oculus Rift?
Oculus Rift is a new video game technology where basically you put a visor over your head in front of your eyes, and the visor basically is mapped out in a way that anywhere you look in any direction, there is a 3D model of a video game or video environment. So it's like if you have either a movie that was filmed in 360 directions or a video game that is mapped out all around you. If you look up, you see whatever's mapped above you. If you look down, you see the floor. So basically, it's an immersive experience where no matter where you turn your head, you're seeing the experience.
Which is very, very different from the virtual reality I remember as a kid that was like, put on these things, and then you have to like move with a cursor. Now that you can implement this eye tracking and head tracking software into it, Oculus Rift is a much more immersive experience.
Exactly. And it's great for Comic-Con because it's like being able to put a ride in your booth, but it takes up no space.
That makes perfect sense.
So like one of the, I think my favorite thing for Comic-Con last year was the Legendary booth had an Oculus Rift Pacific Rim experience.
Oh my god.
And you're literally in the head of the Jaeger as it fights with Knifehead. And like there's this giant kaiju monster swiping at you and you're in this robot like punching at it. And it was amazing.
Yo.
It was so cool.
That's awesome.
And this past year, this is kind of just a neat technology sort of side note, they took that, they put it into an app, and they gave out a free cardboard thing where if you have the right smartphone, I could bring it over.
I've seen that.
And you could just have the experience on your phone. Yeah, super cool. So the point is, for example, that could be part of my Thursday. I do all those things, I find this toy, I go to this booth, I do the Oculus Rift thing. Then, Thursday night, at dinner, the convention hall closes. Everyone files out into, the gas lamp. Everybody finds whatever bar, whatever Tex-Mex place there's like not a 1 hour wait for.
If there's one thing I know about San Diego, if you've never been there, you have to get, and I'm putting quotes around this and not air quotes like ironic, like just straight, you have to get bomb-ass burritos, okay?
Is that like a brand?
No, that is the way that San Diegans describe burritos as bomb-ass. Which is like, there are like fries in it, and there's like a big, it's just like giant, it's like surfer burritos, basically,
nice.
Yeah. Anyway, so sorry.
No, I'm gonna do that next year.
Yo, you need bomb-ass, and if you just go in and you look at one of those like San Diego-looking guys, and he's a local, and you're like, yo, I need a bomb-ass burrito. And he'll be like, oh, and he points you exactly to where to get the best bomb-ass burrito.
That's
there
awesome.
you go. All right.
There's a little pro tip for you.
Yeah.
So let's say it's Thursday and we're eating our bomb-ass burritos.
Yeah, okay.
And, I can sit down with any number of friends and tell them about my day. I saw this thing at this place. I picked up this toy. I met this person. And then they can tell me their day. Completely different list of stuff. Mm-hmm. Totally different subject matter covered, different experiences. I have friends that like almost never go to the floor. They're just in panels. So like I went to these 6 panels. I saw these people speak. One of the things that has grown as the film and television component has sort of escalated is the biggest hall is a hall called Hall H. Hall H is like a giant concrete military bunker, basically, next to the convention hall. All of the biggest movie stuff is in there. So, like, if you're going to have, like, a Star Wars thing, or you're going to have, like, Marvel Studios, all the biggest people go there, but it's so popular, the line is, like, almost as big as the actual hall itself.
Sure.
So, but, like, I know people where they literally go there the night before, they sleep on the lawn of Hall H.
Yeah.
And then Hall H is their whole day.
Right, and so you just try to avoid being arrested by the San Diego police Yeah, you just got to make sure to like look real presentable while you're sleeping.
Yeah, just get like a nice sort of nice sleeping bag, something that sort of looks clean.
And this is kind of like, and it's interesting because, again, that is another point of contention that people complain about is like, whoa, the line for this thing. But it's like amazing because that thing wouldn't have even been there 10 years ago.
Yeah.
So, like, yeah, there's a line for it, but, like, it didn't exist.
Yeah.
You know? So, like, wow, look at this new, awesome, amazing thing that is being presented to you. Like, yeah, a lot of people want it, but, like, you would have wanted it 15 years ago, and you never would have gotten it at all, even if you did want it. Too bad.
One thing I noticed was it used to be that the TV exclusives and the movie exclusives, they'd show their new clip, the new trailer, whatever, a little bit of footage, and then it was like there was a bit of time before it was released onto the web, for everybody, the general population to experience. Now it seems like they'll do the exclusive, and then basically a couple of hours later, the trailer or the
clip, the clip, whatever it is,
will be released on the web, and I feel like it's a good thing because it sort of calms this, I have to get to Comic-Con for the TV and film thing, and holds on to a bit of the comic book reality that they're trying. It's based on the whole convention's based on.
I'd be curious about this. I think a lot of that trend has come from the fact that it's becoming impossible to, monitor whether or not people have cell phone cameras.
Yeah.
I think, it's tricky because, like, I can appreciate that the point originally was supposed to be this notion of, like, it's this fun exclusive thing and only you guys get to see it. And, like, people are excited and they want to have a video of it. I think that it's an interesting balance they're having to strike now because they know the odds are if they don't release it in HD, a bad version of it's going to show up. There have still been things that have held out. I will say, for example, X-Men Apocalypse this year, there's a leaked thing out there on YouTube. They have not released anything yet. They have held fast. There's no trailer. Even though the leak happened, they basically Fox went in there.
We don't negotiate with terrorists.
They got it completely off the internet, and they're like, we'll put out a clip when a clip is ready.
Which has been different to other people. Other people have gone, oh shit, they've got the low res, in the dark video from a phone camera.
Yeah,
and we've got to release our trailer now.
And you see that a lot. And I think that there's an interesting range of sort of the ways they approach it. I know that when Suicide Squad leaked out, they sort of said, here's the trailer. Really, this wasn't meant to be out yet. But since it's out, here's the HD version. I don't think this was Comic-Con necessarily, but I think that, like, for Marvel, at some point, one of their things leaked out, and then they tweeted the official thing, like, an hour later, and I think the tweet was, like, damn you, Hydra. They sort of were having fun with it.
Right.
Everyone's having to figure out this stuff.
Well, I think that what they're doing with X-Men is a great thing, because it's like, okay, yeah, you have this blurry footage, but you really want to see the HD, and, like, hear release dates and the rest of the information, and so that, actually allowing the build-up is a good thing.
I like this.
I'm intrigued with it now just because of hearing that.
Yeah, listen, when it comes out immediately, I'm excited because I want to see it. But when I have to wait a little bit, I like the anticipation. Like, that's a thing that I enjoy. So, like, if I can get into the hall, that sounds awesome. It's only the ones where it's like, for example, this is, again, sort of a nice Comic-Con specific. I am a huge Godzilla fan. I love Godzilla. They cut a trailer, like a sort of promo trailer for the movie, I think like a year or 2 years before it came out, and the trailer was only a promotional thing for Comic-Con. The idea was, listen, this isn't the trailer for the movie, this is like a fun sizzle reel of concepts that we're showing you guys, but like it's not finalized, it's literally, I wasn't able to go to the hall that year, and at the time I was like, oh, that is kind of a bummer, because I would love to see that content, and it's not about waiting, it's truly exclusive. I think thankfully it came out anyway.
Yeah,
so I got it eventually. But that was like, if it's a question of like, oh, I didn't get to see it this weekend, but I'll get to see it in like 6 months, that's fine, that's cool.
Yeah, I just, I feel like there's that, the comic book, nerd from Seinfeld, from Simpsons. I'll get there. How he's sort of like arrogant and has that air. It's like, oh no, I saw the exclusive thing at Comic-Con. It's like that's not the welcoming feel that I sort of seem to think that Comic-Con monster, but
I think at this point a lot of it is it's about just sort of like, here's this fun thing. We know that you guys care more than anybody, and we brought it here to show you guys, which is awesome, which I think is really great. And it's also been really cool just to sort of talk about that as a little sort of subsection of Comic-Con as an experience, to see the showmanship of the panels themselves become so much more impressive. And like ultimately, listen, I'm not unhappy if it's literally just the creator sitting and talking, because I want to hear what they have to say. I want to hear about the craft. I want to hear about what they were working on. But like, I mean, they had Tom Hiddleston come out as Loki. Like, I mean, they literally...
I'm serious, little moments of scripted interaction.
The one, and it's funny, this is sort of cheating because it wasn't at Comic-Con, but it was so clearly informed by Comic-Con. I was able, totally randomly, just because I happened to see the right thing on Facebook at the right time in RSVP, to go to the Marvel Studios Phase 3 announcement that they had here in Los Angeles a couple months ago, that Kevin Feige from Marvel Studios hosted.
If you're not into this whole thing, just a quick Phase 3 aside, Marvel Studios, which is basically the reason you're seeing superhero movies on screen, they're the kings of long-term planning because they've been making comic books for so many years, so they understand the necessity for arcs and the fact that movies take a long time to make. So they have a huge announcement. They've gone their movies into phases, and like Phase 1 is like, we're introducing you to these characters. Phase 2 is blah, blah, blah. And so like, the Marvel Studios Phase 3 announcement was the fact that they were telling the world what their next 3 years or like 4 years of movies is going to be, which is a crap ton.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but Avengers Age of Ultron was the end of Phase 2.
I think technically Ant-Man was the end of Phase 2. And I think that Captain America Civil War is the beginning of Phase 3.
Right, that makes sense.
And he would know, because he went to the announcement.
Exactly.
Which he's about to tell us all about.
Well, that's why I asked.
But it was, basically, and this is what I think actually we're sort of, coming up to. We're getting to a point now where it's so full at Comic-Con that basically a lot of Comic-Con style events are occurring elsewhere. So Disney, for example, has a Star Wars specific con called Star Wars Celebration. Disney has a Disney specific convention called D23. This was literally something...
What does the 23 stand for?
I don't think I recall. It's out there. Someone said I should know, but I didn't realize I was going to be telling the story. It just occurred to me.
I told you this was a gotcha style podcast.
Bang.
Oh, you got me, you guys. But this was literally, it was like Kevin Feige, who's the head of Marvel Studios, just decided to have a Comic-Con panel on a Tuesday in the middle of nothing in particular. He just literally was like, come to, our movie theater. They have their movie theater on Hollywood, where they sort of do their screenings. There's like, we're going to have a panel. And he announced all their new movies. They brought out Chris Evans and Robert Downey Jr., and he was so good at working the audience, making jokes, kind of teasing people, like misdirects. And I just remember the first panels that I went to, they were truly PowerPoint presentations. It was literally just like someone sitting down at a desk at a PowerPoint presentation, and there's nothing wrong with that. And a lot of panels still do that. But just the polish that they have grown to be capable of having, and the sense of sort of like at one point he made a fake announcement for the title of the new Captain America movie, and then he was like, you know what, I don't think that's the right title, and then he changed it to Civil War, which was this very popular storyline, and it was just just the showmanship of it, and I think that's all stuff you track back to Comic-Con.
And if we're going to circle back to this analogy that I really like, it's the difference of sitting in your grimy cave-dwelling thing and like looking at that screen of like, look, I love my train games as much as other people. I love making spreadsheets and like staring at screens, but like I also like nice games. And so you're like there, you're out of your cave, and you just walk into this giant gleaming thing. Yeah. And that's kind of where it's going, which, there's bad stuff, but oh man, the gleam looks really nice.
No, and that's the thing. So to sort of like, I think probably come to sort of the current and most recent experience I have with Comic-Con, which I think plays into that exactly. So my day job, I work at a management company, an entertainment management company. So we're like agents, but we're just a little smaller client list, a little bit more focused.
Oh, so a management company, it's not just like a company of people who wear ties and like short sleeves and walk around and boss people around?
No, I wear this same Kylo Ren t-shirt that I'm wearing right now, the villain of Star Wars Episode 7, The Force Awakens.
So in case you're not in any industry, yes, a manager is not just like somebody's regional boss. A manager is someone who helps direct
guide a
someone's
career, sort of give career advice, sort of that sort of thing. But I work with directors and screenwriters, but I also have a specialty in working with comic book creators. Sometimes they're writers, sometimes they're artists, sort of however we can be helpful in guiding a career. Several of whom are people that I met at Comic-Con. Because basically, now what I'll do is I'll go to the convention hall and I'll walk the floor looking for material that looks like it could make a good movie or TV show.
So now you're getting pitched Freak Show?
Basically, yeah, kind of. It's sort of, that's the thing. It's like now I've sort of jumped over and am the other half of that equation, which is really cool.
That's kind of amazing.
Yeah.
And it's helpful because it's sort of like I am able to know, I know what situation you're in. I know how you're coming at this. I know what some of your questions are going to be. So it's a combination of looking for material or looking for clients. I know a lot of super talented comic creators who either want to work in film and television or have material that would fit well, but don't have anybody on their team, like sort of helping them know who they should be talking to or what that process looks like. So, Comic-Con for me now is very much this sort of hybrid of, listen, I'm never not going to go as a fan. Like, I get there and my fan brain kicks in first. For better or for worse, when I walk onto the floor, the first thing is, oh my God, I got to go to this booth because I want to see this cool thing. But there is this other component to it now where it's also, all right, so let's turn on the professional brain for a second. Does this story seem like it could work well as like a TV show? Does this creator seem like they might need representation? I think that is a big part of Comic-Con now. Certainly I know a lot of other people that have similar experiences where that's part of the show for them. And to me, that's the thing I always come back to. None of these things, in my experience, are knocking other parts out. These are just additional parts of the experience that you can have.
So people can still be discovered. That little idea that's only been created by, only known about by the person who created it and their mum. Mm-hmm. Those ideas can still be discovered. Like, I want the comic book writer who's got an amazing idea, but he doesn't have the social skills or the ability to actually sell it.
Don't perpetuate the...
Well, he doesn't have the skills of Jackson.
A lot of the time you don't have the contacts, you don't know what that world looks like.
There we go, a much better phrase, not feeding into the stereotype of people who like comic books.
Well,
I tell you.
There's all kinds of different reasons why people might not have that, sort of path laid out for them.
I'll say it takes one to know one, Just to clear that up.
Yeah, let it be known, in case you don't know Jono in real life, this man has no game. No social skills.
Lies. This guy, look at this guy.
I know, he's such a cutie.
He's the best. Oh my gosh. But that is actually a wonderful segue into a very important part of Comic-Con, which I haven't touched on yet. There's two sections of the convention floor, which are two of my favorite sections. It is Small Press and Artist's Alley. Small Press are the booths that are basically for people that are not affiliated with any big publisher. They're not with Dark Horse or Image or Marvel or DC. They either self-published or they have a little publishing label, and basically, sometimes they literally did it with, Kinko's, and they just sort of were they made their materials, they bought or they rented out their booth, and they're just there to be listen, I'm not part of some big thing, I made this, here's what it is, if you're interested, here's my box.
And you know what? I have a fun little story about that, look, he's a good friend of mine, and, He's been making DIY comics for, I think now it's 14 years. His name's Ben Snakepit, and he's a wonderful guy, and he makes a comic of his day, and he's done it for every day for the last 15 years.
That's awesome.
And he's gotten a lot of press in the DIY community, but again, he was going to Kinko's and Xeroxing stuff. And yeah, now at this point he's putting together in books, but he said the best moment in his life was his books were at Comic-Con in that small press section. And Matt Groening, the creator of The Simpsons, came up to his booth and was like, I've been looking for these for a year.
God.
And Groening just bought everything and
That's
was
amazing.
like, I've been hearing all about this.
Wow.
And that is...
There you go. That's Comic-Con. That's what
that is Comic-Con, right? Like, and the
Exactly.
small press, that has not disappeared. That thing is still there.
No,
That's
and
good to
like,
hear. That's
that
really
to
good to
me, it's like to have both of those things present is part of, again, the personality of the show. It's like, listen, if you're there to see like the big glitzy awesome stuff from the huge publishers, it's totally there. They spared no expense. The booths are huge. They like reach all the way up to the ceiling. But like, you know, you do that for a while and then it's like, I want to go see some like cool, creative, raw stuff. I want to talk to the guy that wrote it. And like, to me, that's one of the really big core parts of Comic-Con.
That's the sacredness.
Yeah, meeting people and talking to people and having conversations about what they're working on and what the process was. How did you get where you're going? Like
Their
anyone's-
influences, yeah.
aspiring to work in comics. There's no better opportunity to like really figure out how to make that happen than to be in a place like Comic-Con surrounded by a range of people that are hyper successful to people that are just starting, that have all had different experiences. They all have like, and they want to talk. Like, people are very friendly. They're very eager to share their knowledge, you know? I mean, like, and I think that frankly, I've known a lot of people that have gotten so much out of that part of it, just in the standpoint of like, wow, I learned so much because, you know, this is a world that I've always loved. A dear friend of mine, Hanai Rivera, who's an illustrator, you know, she's always loved children's books. And, you know, we had sort of always talked about the fact that was something she wanted to do, you know, and like, you know, I don't know that someone would immediately leap to like, oh, children's books, Comic-Con, but like, it covers so much that publishing kids' books, totally in there. She went, she talked to artists, she talked to publishers, and she has, like, I think, a couple of published books now.
Yeah.
And it's like, those experiences and conversation and that knowledge, that's not something that she could easily get so rapidly and from such a wide and diverse array of people anywhere but Comic-Con.
And I think, and this is, I can't believe it didn't even come up to me until right now, but like Comic-Con, that is the word. It's Comic-Con, it's Comic-Con. We kind of forget that in the end it is a convention. And that's kind of what conventions are at their heart, is a group of like-minded people who like love these same things, getting together and having an excuse to just have the time of their lives talking about it, sharing it, and just reveling in what you love so much about it. And it's very easy to be like, Comic-Con, Comic-Con, Comic-Con. It is, in the end, still a comic convention. And it will always be that, I think, right? I don't know.
Absolutely. And that's the thing, is that like for me, I think one of my favorite parts of the show is, and I think this like is an example of what happened this year, you know, I was hanging around this like the Star Wars booth. You know, because like all the new Star Wars stuff is there, and it's all really exciting, and you know, and like, listen, there's people I've never met, I don't know them. We're both looking at the same TIE fighter pilot,
sure,
and we just start talking about it. Just like, what do you think of the design? Like, oh, do you like the new helmet? I don't know this guy.
Yeah.
Like, I've never met him. We're not having some big reunion. But he seems interested in that TIE fighter pilot, and I have opinions about that TIE fighter pilot. So we're going to talk about that TIE fighter pilot.
Awesome.
And that's great. That's amazing. And it's like, those are the kinds of things from Comic-Con where it's just kind of like, you just sort of feel it's like, yeah, man, we all dig this stuff.
Yeah,
and we want
yeah.
to talk about it.
Yeah.
And I know that you want to talk about it because you're here and you're experiencing the same thing.
And there is a leveling effect too, because this is last year, you are a manager. You are like a professional in this industry. That guy, who knows? That guy could have been a straight publisher. He could be a writer. Who knows? It doesn't matter. There's this leveling effect of, if you are there, you are family. Yeah. You know, and that is something that's amazing. Yeah. That it's just, you know, I mean, maybe you won't see Robert Downey Jr. geeking out on the floor unless he's getting paid to do it, but
it's
anyone's. Yeah.
I will say, just because like it merits mentioning, as soon as I finished talking to that guy about the TIE fighter pilot, I turned around and Greg Grunberg from Lost, who's in the new Star Wars movie, was there buying a Star Wars hat. And I was like, I'm so excited for Star Wars. I can't wait.
And my point is vindicated.
That's the thing. It's all of those things. And like, that was such a perfect little Comic-Con moment, because it was literally just that sort of like core, like, oh man, stranger, and we're geeking out. And then I turn around and it's like, you're going to be in Star Wars.
God damn.
All right. So Comic-Con, huge giant convention in San Diego that is now basically a week long. It goes from Wednesday evening-ish all the way until Sunday night, and I'm sure there's parties after, and I'm sure there are people that still extend the party as long as they can. It's like basically like a Star Wars prequel release. You know, like they just keep inching it up a bit so they can keep counting that money as part of the opening weekend money, right? Okay, so your experience, one of these things about Comic-Con is it's really, if you like comics, if you like really, at this point, pop culture. Anything that has to do with these pop culture things, of movie and TV and films, it's all there and you get to experience all of it from all different levels. As a fan, if you are a creator of content, if you are a seller or publisher or distributor of that content, like, there is something there for you. And it becomes this whole social festivity, right? You see friends there who, from a long time ago, who were into the same thing. You make friends there, and you look forward to either A, like, oh, you also live in the San Fernando Valley? Like, me too, let's hang. Or, I can't wait to see you next year. Let's save on hotel costs and get a room together. You know what I mean? All that stuff is there. You get to see the Oculus Rift tech stuff, which I am so sad I did not get to do the Pacific Rim Oculus Rift thing.
Do you have one of the little cardboard ones?
I'm sure I can get one. I
have
can make
one.
I can make one.
Because I think I have an extra one.
Wait, Google Goggles? Is that what they're called?
Yeah.
That is literally the worst name I've ever heard for anything. Why don't you just call them
Google.
Goo Goggles? They're Goo Goggles.
Google
right?
is not like Google. It's like the company's name Google.
I know. That's why you can't call it goggles, because it's literally there's one letter difference, right?
It's the thing you need to use to see Pacific Rim. Okay,
So,
Mark?
What about
and
Google
then-
Bugle?
Ooh, what? Oh my God, Google Bugle. So, and that was they were trying to go into military bases to help wake up calls, and that was the Google Bugle. And then even later on that, there's these small press things that are still a big part about it, where you can go and even if you created your Xerox comic, like, there is just a place to share content and revel in the love of that content. And in the most gorgeous weather in the country. Like, as someone who goes to convention centers for a living, the most gorgeous convention center in the country I've been to. So, like, this is kind of cool. I mean, did I leave anything huge out? Oh, and the panels too. Like, my God, this is insane. It's awesome.
The only thing that I feel like I need to at least touch on, because it's another part that I love, is that, so the convention hall closes, around like 7 or what have you. And basically, we sort of mentioned the Gaslamp District. Everything outside of the convention hall becomes the biggest, nerdiest party you've ever seen in your life.
Yeah.
And the trick of it is that, like, I've never gone to Sundance. Like, it's one of those things I really want to do, but I've never gone to the Sundance Film Festival, which is this very big film market / sort of social event in the entertainment world. And my understanding is that Comic-Con's party scene has started to absorb some of those traits, and some are good and some are bad. I will say, like, there's like the super schmancy parties, they're really big, sort of, complicated, you have to know the right people.
Yeah, you
blah,
put
blah,
on your
blah.
tuxedo t-shirt.
Right, there's like,
it's
like the big, like, brought to you by some big TV show, and like those are always super fun because they're like very like glitzy and cool. There's the everybody hangs out at a bar, everybody hangs out at a pub. I would say that sort of to me, the truest Comic-Con experience is the hotels that are next to the actual convention hall. The bars for those hotels are, totally open access. That's where all the, like, creators go. Like, all the, like, people go to get a beer and hang out. And if you go to those places, you're going to have a good time. There's a lot of people. You're going to bump into people that people whose work you love. It's just about, like, going, having a beer, hanging out. And then, there's sort of everything in between. I will say, just because it was wonderful, so this past Comic-Con, this one that just ended a couple months ago, Felicia Day's company, Geek and Sundry, they hosted a dance party. They took over a bar sort of above a restaurant, and man, it was just awesome. It was just because it was like they're playing like remixes of like the Neverending Story and Mortal Kombat. And it was just this and it was like just super chill and like just a lot of my friends, and it was just like, and it wasn't like some big complicated thing. It was literally just like, come on inside, grab a drink, enjoy sort of the huge, weird, geeky partiness of this atmosphere.
And what's for me, the most exciting part about that is going to like a giant geek dance party. no one's gonna make fun of my dancing.
Yeah.
We
were all just going for it.
I can just dance and I can do whatever I want.
We're like-minded in that way.
Yeah, I'm not gonna lie. My best move, my lady tells me this is my best move. I impersonate Molly Ringwald in 16 Candles.
Oh,
yeah, and you know, the arms akimbo and like legs just going. Yeah, I can't do that in the hip LA clubs. But I can do that at that Geek and Sundry party.
It would have been perfect. That would have been fantastic.
Damn.
But the night scene of Comic-Con is its whole own world. And it's funny because even like Professional Brain is in the mix there. There is some networking involved.
Sure.
You know, I mean, like, I do sort of tend to think it's like if you get, like, you want to find that proper balance of, like, you know, like, hey, we're talking, it's Comic-Con, this is fun. You know, but it just so happens a lot of people work in...
Every once in a while, you say you ran out of business cards even if you haven't. You know, like, it's just like, look, I'm not in that mode right now. We'll talk later.
You know, and it's like, you know, like, they're like, come find me on the floor tomorrow.
Right.
Come find me next to Batman, you know?
Yeah.
It's that Comic-Con thing. But, like, that is this other part of it, you know, where, like, you just spend all day running around the floor, seeing stuff, buying things, whatever, and then you just spill out into San Diego, you know, and find, it's a lot like Comic-Con. Find your version of it. You know, it's like, I know people where they're like, you know what, the schmancy party's not really my thing.
Yeah.
I'm gonna go to this pub, I'm gonna hang out with these 7 people who, like, I don't see that often. That's my Comic-Con night. I know people where it's like, oh, I, like, know people at the studio and we're gonna go to this party. You know, that's my Comic-Con night. I think the thing that I always stress about every part of Comic-Con, it's the day, it's the night, it's the whole thing. There's so many options. And when it expands the way that it's expanding like this, there's just more options. Just, if you put in the work to put together your ideal Comic-Con, it's there for you. Like, you can put together, you know, whatever blocks you want, and you can end up with your Comic-Con. And I think that, like, the great thing about Comic-Con to me is that you can have so many different variations on that, and it just becomes about, like, listen, like, what do you geek out on? Like, what is it that makes you happy, that made you want to make this trip to this giant, crazy sort of celebration? And, you know, find it, man. It's here.
So basically what you're saying is that Comic-Con is the What's Your Scene in reality. Right?
Yeah.
Because that's what this whole podcast is, right? It's just like, whatever you geek out on, come out and talk about it. So it's like a less cool version of our podcast.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I've been saying, before I even knew about this podcast, that's how I've been describing Comic-Con to people.
Yeah.
Well, on that note, David...
you really did work on Time Machine.
Don't tell Guy Pearce that I've been borrowing it.
Thank you so much for letting us in on your magnificent inside line on Comic-Con, and just expanding on the reality of it has been amazing.
Yeah, and thanks for coming in and sharing your enthusiasm. That's really what this whole thing is about, is we just love enthusiasm for stuff. And dude, this guy's got it in droves. I just want y'all to know.
Well, it's my pleasure. And honestly, it really does. It makes me happy, because this is, I think, and fittingly, over the years that I've been going to Comic-Con, you know, the first year I went by myself. The second year I went with my buddy Max. Every year we've picked up 2 to 3 more people. Comic-Con for me now is this, like, 20-person experience. You know, we're not all, like, in one bus like the Muppets, but, like, you know, we're all caravanning, and I think the growth of Comic-Con, the expansion of Comic-Con, is one of the things that I love most about it. And certainly, you know, I think it's one of those, it's something that every year I think holds potential appeal to more and more people. And yeah, anytime that I can kind of, like, spread the word that it's like, listen, I know that you've never done this before, or that you might not be into comics, so you don't know if this is your thing, like, just, like, take a look at it, man, because like, it is so much fun. It's just a big party for people that love something deeply, you know. And I think that, like, there's more and more stuff that's a part of that party, and, like, find your place in it and come to San Diego next year. Like, you're gonna have a good time.
That sounds awesome. Is there still a chance that I could run into Lloyd Kaufman again?
I would say that's very possible. I would say, you know, Comic-Con, you never know what's going to happen, you know? I mean, every day is full of possibilities.
I'm in, man. Thanks so much for joining us.
My pleasure.
Cheers, Dave.
Yeah, this has been another pretty exciting episode of What You're Seeing, right?
An awesome episode.
I know, right? Yeah, we're really good at this.
I think it must be us.
It's all us.
It's you guys.
Yeah. All right, well,
this has been Jono Oldham.
And this has been Mark Calderaro.
And this has been What You're Seeing.
Have a good day.
Thanks.